There's a new Supergirl movie. It came out a few weeks ago. It's not perfect. I had my problems with it, but overall, I liked it. And if you haven't seen it, I recommend it. That movie is adapted from a comic book miniseries called Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, written by Tom King, with art by Bilquis Evely. King has been a mainstay at DC Comics for more than a decade, writing for the company's marquee characters, Batman, Wonder Woman, and not just Supergirl, but also her cousin, Superman. King's best-known Superman work to date is a 12-part series he wrote for the Walmart-exclusive Superman Giant anthology series. You might think, shit, it sounds like nothing good could come from that, and I don't blame you. But this 12-part story was good enough that it was subsequently reprinted as a 6-part standalone series, originally published and distributed exclusively at Walmart in 2018, written by Tom King, with pencils by Andy Kubert and inks by Sandra Hope. The story is called Up in the Sky. It begins with Batman telling Superman about a terrible crime that's just taken place in Gotham, a home invasion that left 4 people dead, the older couple who own the home and 2 of their young foster children. Another foster child was shot and is alive in the hospital, and a 4th was taken. No trace of her whereabouts. A tragedy, to be sure, but why did Batman call Superman? Batman tells him to go to the hospital and talk to the girl who was shot. So Superman does. He listens to the child's story, which is about how her foster sister, Alice, was taken by a man in a spacesuit. Taken up there. Up in the sky. Superman talks to Green Lantern about the case. Lantern tells him that Alice's abductor probably used a Zeta beam to leave the vicinity of Earth. Zeta beams are hard to trace, but the Ronians might know something. Lantern tells Supes that the Green Lantern Corps has been alerted about Alice's abduction, and they'll all be on the lookout for her, but the universe is such a big place that it's unlikely they'll be able to find her. Batman pushes Superman to go find Alice, to take his one lead that the Ronians might be able to trace the Zeta beam the abductor used to escape and investigate. Superman is reluctant. He has responsibilities here on Earth, and locating the girl could take weeks, months, longer, and that's if it's even possible. Batman says, I have responsibilities too, but there's a difference between you and me, between you and everyone. We are who we are, and you're Superman. Superman talks it over with his dad, who also pushes him in the direction of going after the girl. As he's still struggling to decide what to do, Superman gets another call from Batman. The girl he spoke to in the hospital, Alice's foster sister, has died. That seems to make up his mind. Superman talks with Lois, tells her he's leaving, and asks her if she wouldn't mind not falling off any buildings until he gets back. Then he takes off to speak with the Ronians about that Zeta beam. When he gets there, the Ronian guy he talks to has some bad news. You can't really trace Zeta beams. They're too complex. The last computer they used to try and do it self-destructed. Superman's like, well, plug my super brain into the thing. I'll analyze the Zeta beam. The Ronian guy is like, okay, your funeral, and they plug Superman into the, Zeta beam tracing machine, whatever they've got. The machine triggers a memory for Superman of a time when a child dressed in a Superman costume jumped off the roof of his house trying to fly. The event nearly compels Superman to give up being a hero, because he doesn't want this sort of thing to happen to any more children. Then the memory jumps ahead to a scene from a possible future where Superman did give up, and he's confronted by a vision of his Kryptonian father Jor-El, who shames him with the number of people who died that he could have saved. If you help them, they die. If you don't help them, they die, Superman says. Then the scene changes again, and Superman, as Clark Kent, is standing on a roof next to a little girl. The little girl asks if Clark is going to save her. He answers that he doesn't know if he can. Then he and the girl are sitting on a bench, and she is telling him about how, on their way to the Bodes galaxy, they stopped at a museum so she could use the bathroom. Superman realizes that this little girl is Alice, the girl he's looking for, and now he knows where they were headed. Superman follows the trail left by Alice and her abductor, and each stop along the way seems to bring a new and unique obstacle to overcome. He finds himself in a brutal boxing match with an alien who has promised to give Superman information about the girl's abductor if Superman can win. The alien proves to be a superior fighter to Superman in every way but one. He can't keep Superman down. Round after round, beating after beating, Superman struggles back to his feet, refusing to quit. Finally, the alien admits defeat and gives the match to Superman. Following a disastrous encounter with another alien, Superman is found near death by a ship with a healer who could save Superman, but only at the cost of his own life. The healer is ordered by his captain to let Superman die, to think of himself and his own family. But the healer has formed a psychic connection with Superman and is tormented by visions of all the good Superman has done in his life, all the hope he has inspired, and of his present mission to rescue little Alice. The healer chooses to save Superman and dies, trading away his own life force. This part ends with Superman visiting the healer's wife and children, telling them how sorry he is, and passing on the healer's final words to them. All can be lost, but none are alone. Next, we find Superman waiting in an intergalactic telephone exchange, hoping to be able to make a call home to Lois. While he waits, he is preoccupied with morbid daydreams of what might be happening to her in his absence. He imagines her being killed by Lex Luthor and the Joker, hit by a truck, eaten by a shark, burned at the stake, falling to her death from a helicopter. Lois Lane stuff. Finally, he's able to get her on the phone, and all is well. She's very much alive, arguing with Perry about a story, and she misses him. He misses her too. Next, thrown back in time and temporarily robbed of his memory, Superman finds himself amongst Sergeant Rock and Easy Company as they doggedly try to advance on an enemy position under heavy fire. Eventually, after a grenade goes off in his hand, Superman regains his memory and uses his powers to help Rock and Easy Company take the position they've been charging. Then he takes off, hoping to catch the black hole or whatever it was he came through and use it to return to his own time. As he goes, Superman thanks Sergeant Rock for teaching him the importance of Rock and Easy Company's simple motto, through another day, up another hill, just a little farther. Next, we get a retelling of the time Superman raced the Flash to see which one of them was truly the fastest man alive. Well, one of the times they did that. Anyway, this time was for charity, and to make things more interesting, Lex Luthor placed a $1 billion bet, promising to donate it all if Superman won. The cruel Luthorian twist is this: Lex doesn't expect Superman to win, because as great as Superman is, the Flash is faster. So when Superman loses, he'll not only have to live with his failure in the race, he'll also have to live with depriving the charities which stand to benefit of $1 billion of Lex's money. The other twist is, Superman wins. He shouldn't win. He couldn't win. He's not faster than the Flash. It's not possible. And yet, he does. He wins. This, our storyteller shares, is a contradiction. Our storyteller is revealed to be Alice, the girl Superman is searching for. She is chained up in a dungeon somewhere in the universe, surrounded by aliens, telling the story to them, or to herself, or to the Superman doll she was playing with when she was taken from Earth, which she still clutches to her chest. It doesn't matter. Life is full of contradictions, Alice says. No one's coming to save me. No one's going to save me. I'm alone, and I don't want to be alone. But I am alone, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. But Superman. But Superman. But Superman. Next, Superman is struck by some wacky space lightning that splits him into two people, his human side, represented by Clark Kent, and his Kryptonian side, represented by a very logical and all-business Superman. While Clark insists on continuing his efforts to find and rescue Alice, no matter how hopeless they seem, Superman announces that he is going to leave Clark behind and return to Earth, where his true responsibilities lie. Only Superman never actually leaves. He hangs around, and eventually Clark convinces him that they need each other, that Superman needs both the physical strength of his Kryptonian body and the strength of the hope and compassion he gets from his human upbringing. They fly up into space to get struck by that wacky lightning again and get put back together. Then Superman's investigation leads him to the throne of one of his greatest enemies, Darkseid. Darkseid claims he knows where Alice is, but he will only share this information with Superman if Superman, for Darkseid's amusement, violates his moral code and takes an innocent life. So Superman finds an alien who is terminally ill and contemplating taking his own life to end his pain. The alien can't bring himself to do it, so he asks Superman to do it for him. But even though the alien is clearly in pain and is begging Superman to kill him and end his suffering, Superman hesitates. We don't see what happens between Superman and the alien at the moment of truth, but Superman returns to Darkseid and announces that he has done it. He has taken an innocent life. Darkseid doesn't believe him. If I'm lying, says Superman, then I've broken my word. And if it's the truth, then I've also broken my word. Either way, Darkseid, I've gone against my principles. You win. Darkseid points Superman toward Alice, but before he gets there, we find him living out a fantasy version of his life on Earth. He's still Superman, but there's not much for him to do. He has time to spend with Lois, and to focus on his job at the Daily Planet, and to grab lunch with Batman and Wonder Woman, and to rescue a cat stuck up a tree, and to live his life without constantly worrying about the next world-ending threat. It's a fantasy offered to Superman by the abductor of Alice. I've used my resources to hire the most tenacious beings in the galaxy to stop you, the abductor tells Superman. But nothing will break you. Fine. I can also use those resources to help you, to give you peace. All you have to do is give up. Stop fighting me. Stop trying to take her back. If you do, the better world you have dreamed of is yours. We cut from the dream to the reality of a bloodied, captive Superman who says, "Thank you for the offer, but I'm afraid I have to decline." Imagine this alien asshole offering to use all of his resources to bring about peace on Earth just so Superman will let him keep the little girl he stole. Boy, these scumbags on the Epstein list really will stop at nothing to save their asses, huh? Anyway, in the next part, with Superman still chained, the villain, the abductor of Alice, launches an attack against Earth, sending hundreds of killer robots who are met by Earth's other heroes. The fight doesn't go well for the good guys, and while the likes of Batman, Wonder Woman, Flash, Hawkman, and the rest are pushed to the brink of defeat, the villain who sent them, who never gets a name, taunts the captive Superman. "Your chains are forged from the strongest metal in the universe," the villain says. "They are unbreakable." Superman breaks the chains. "Most of my robots are currently destroying your home," the villain says, "but there are still enough of them here to defeat you." Superman defeats the army of robots and deactivates the ones attacking Earth, saving the world from the other side of the galaxy. "Why are you fighting me for her?" asks the villain. "She's no one special. That's why I took her. I needed a human, just a random human, to use to calibrate my weapons for my attack on Earth. She's just a girl. No one cares about her. She's worthless." Superman smashes the last of the robots. "No, she is not," he says. He breaks through the wall into the cell where Alice is chained up and tells her she's going home. That journey home takes up most of the final part of the story. Superman dresses Alice in a spacesuit and flies her back to Earth, crossing all the galaxies she passed through on the way out. As they go, Alice asks him an endless series of questions about how his powers work, about who would win in a fight between him and Batman, about if Superman believes in God. His answer to that one, "My ma and pa believe, and I believe in them." Along the way, they also make a stop to visit the aliens Superman was supposed to kill for the amusement of Darkseid. It turns out Superman didn't kill him after all. He found a cure for his illness. "Why did you help him?" asks Alice. "Because he needed it," says Superman. "Are you going to help everyone?" asks Alice. "No," says Superman, "but I'm going to try." They finally reach Earth. Superman drops Alice off at an orphanage where he promises she will be taken care of and where the people will find her a good home. And he tells Alice that if she ever needs anything, all she has to do is talk to him wherever she is, and he'll hear her, and he'll be there. Before he goes, Superman asks Alice if she has any more questions. He's a bit surprised when she doesn't have any more. "I bet you thought I would ask you why you left everything behind to come save me," she says. "But I'm not going to ask it because I already know why. It's not hard. It's just, you're Superman." Excuse me, I need a minute. Fucking pollen count. More than any other Superman story I can think of at the moment, Up in the Sky can be aptly described as being more than the sum of its parts. As a piece of writing, it is far from perfect. There are multiple points throughout its 12-part narrative where it drags or feels artificially extended or feels overly familiar or derivative or reads as a bit too cute and pleased with itself. But ultimately, those shortcomings are irrelevant because in the end, it works. The flaws in Tom King's writing are compensated for by the big emotional swings that he takes. Big emotional swings that pay off. Structurally, Up in the Sky is a series of short stories. Not even stories, really, vignettes, united by the common thread that they all take place during Superman's mission to save Alice. Some of these vignettes work marvelously on their own. The story of the alien healer who is persuaded by Superman's heroism to sacrifice his own life so that Superman can survive. The interlude with Superman waiting to make a phone call to Lois as she dies over and over again in his lurid imagination. Others don't work so well for me. The boxing match is a drawn-out, foregone conclusion, as is the section where Superman is split into two separate people. That one is also a too obvious minor variation on the junkyard scene from the movie Superman 3, though I do appreciate that King finds a new ending for his version, with the two halves of Superman learning to accept that they need each other instead of the Clark half killing the Superman half. And some of the vignettes, like the retelling of the Superman versus the Flash race, or the episode where Superman finds himself in World War II alongside Sergeant Rock, feel like fragments of ideas King had in his pocket that he decided to make use of to hit his length requirement or to give a particular opportunity to his artist. More on that in a bit. Though once again, even though the segment about the Superman and Flash race reads mostly like an excuse to revisit one of the character's greatest hits, I appreciate how King tells the story through Alice's eyes and uses this section as a way to not only bring Alice in, but also to bring in her perspective. Regardless of whether the individual vignettes work or not, that overall structure is very much to the story's benefit. By dropping us in with the relevant action already well underway at the start of every new part, King relieves himself of the tiresome duty of having to explain how Superman got here, and sometimes even precisely what Superman is doing. This is a story about Superman conducting an investigation, but it is not a procedural. The story is not driven by its plot, but by its characters, and the chopped-up episodic structure reinforces that. Are you hung up on where Superman is, or how he got there, or how he found out this is where he should go? You're missing the point. If that stuff was important, the story would have drawn your attention to it. You're meant to focus on other things. Other things like, well, mainly Superman. Not Superman as an action hero, not Superman as a superhero, but Superman as a person. Who he is, why people like Alice have so much faith in him, and why he is worthy of that faith. There's a moment near the end of the segment where Superman has been split in two by space lightning, where Clark says to his other half, "Remember what Paul used to say? Listen to what a man says, judge what a man does." Throughout Up in the Sky, we see, by what he does, that Superman is every bit the person Alice believes him to be. Yes, he possesses incredible strength, speed, and durability, but in this story, we see him vulnerable far more than we see him dominant. He takes a terrible beating in the boxing match. He takes another one from the villain's horde of killer robots. He is rendered near death at one point. It isn't the fact that he wins fights that makes him a hero. It's the fact that he never gives up. It's also the fact that he's embarked on this journey in the first place to save the life of one person. More Than Once, Up in the Sky reminds me of one of my favorite scenes from last year's Superman film, when a building is collapsing across a highway leading out of Metropolis, and Superman appears to catch it and hold it up long enough for the last remaining car to get away. All his speed, strength, and determination put to work to save a single life. That's what makes him Superman. Then again, there are points at which that comparison works against Up in the Sky as well. Moments when I feel as though it's taking pages and pages to make the same point, which the Superman movie makes in a few seconds. But in the end, the story succeeds because it takes those big swings and connects when it needs to. Up in the Sky is like a baseball team stacked with sluggers, but not much good at anything else. The pitching is shit, nobody can field worth a damn, no arms, no speed, but it doesn't matter. They win anyway because they put so many runs on the board. Okay, that's not fair. Up in the Sky isn't that hopeless apart from the home runs, as it were. I just really wanted to use that baseball metaphor. Those big emotional swings are what save it from its more mediocre elements, though, and allow it to finish up as something very special. King knows what button to push and when. If you're not moved by Superman's devotion to Lois, waiting all that time just to call her and hear her voice and know that she's okay and tell her that he misses her, I don't know. And if you can read this whole series and get to that ending, when little Alice tells Superman that she knows why he went all that way just to find her, because he's Superman, and not at least be a little misty-eyed, I mean, at that point, I have to ask, do you even like Superman? The artwork in the series is by penciler Andy Kubert and inker Sandra Hope. Sandra Hope has worked in the comics business for over 30 years, starting out at Wildstorm, back when that was a part of Image Comics, then moving on to Marvel and DC. She's inked for most of DC's top-tier characters, Batman, Aquaman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, the Justice League, but one of her first gigs for DC was working on Adventures of Superman number 600 in 2002. Andy Kubert, in addition to being an outstanding artist in his own right, is part of one of the royal families of comic books, son of legendary artist Joe Kubert and brother to Adam Kubert, who is also an artist, and uncle to Katie Kubert, an editor with an impressive list of credits at DC and Marvel. Though he started his career at DC, Andy Kubert really established himself with his work for Marvel Comics, where he drew the X-Men, Captain America, the Avengers, among others. Returning to DC in the mid-2000s, he distinguished himself mostly as a Batman artist, though throughout Up in the Sky, he demonstrates that he can draw Superman just fine as well. Andy Kubert's Superman is exactly what this story needs him to be. This isn't a story about Superman's physical strength and power, but about his compassion and his determination and his willingness to put himself in danger for the sake of someone else. Physically, Kubert's Superman is still very impressive. He's the square-jawed, muscle-bound mountain of a man we've come to expect, but Kubert uses body language and positioning within the frame to project powerlessness, exhaustion, and weakness. Yes, he is Superman. Yes, he is our mightiest hero, but he's out there all alone, at the mercy of a very big, very hazardous universe. And Kubert lets us feel that. I mentioned earlier that some of Tom King's narrative choices might have been made to give particular opportunities to his artist. Andy Kubert's first job as an artist at DC Comics was drawing Sergeant Rock, and his father, Joe, co-created Sergeant Rock and is still the artist most associated with the character. Artistically, the Sergeant Rock vignette is one of the highlights of the series. Kubert and Hope, along with the series colorist Brad Anderson, conjure an eerily timeless version of the European theater of World War II, claustrophobically small and yet unbounded, all dirt and smoke, surrounded by an infinite hazy sky. The only exception to the green-brown color palette is the bright blue and red of Superman's costume, which is concealed for most of the segment by an army uniform before re-emerging near the end after Superman regains his memory. Superman could hardly be presented more obviously or powerfully as the embodiment of hope in a ruthless, violent world. Kubert and his collaborators also show themselves to be wonderfully talented pulp sci-fi artists. They render the universe through which Superman travels as weird and colorful, convincingly vast and dangerous, populated with bizarre creatures. And yet, within all this strangeness is so much that is familiar and mundane. I love how the communications hub where Superman waits to make his call to Lois is drawn like some kind of social services office from hell, a room full of bored aliens all waiting to hear a clerk yell out their number. Even in the farthest reaches of space, the bureaucracy is inescapable. The most important creation in the series, though, visually and narratively, is little Alice. The story isn't about her, but if she wasn't in it, there would be no story. King introduces Alice into the story as a physical presence in such a casual way. After hearing about her abduction from her ill-fated foster sister and seeing Superman wring his hands over the matter before finally deciding to head into outer space to look for her, suddenly, there she is. In the vision Superman experiences while interpreting the Zeta beam, first standing behind him on a roof, then sitting beside him on a bench. We aren't even sure that she is Alice until the encounter is over, and Superman says her name as he snaps back to reality. Speaking of reality, when we meet Alice for the first time outside of a dream, King uses a similarly indirect technique to introduce her, having her narrate the retelling of the race between Superman and the Flash and not showing her on the page until the very end. The introductions of Alice mirror her role in the story and her relationship to Superman. She begins seeming insignificant and is eventually revealed to be of utmost importance. It's possible to read Alice as more of a MacGuffin than a character. She exists so that Superman can rescue her. She's an object for him to attain. But I think the story does enough to avoid that. Alice doesn't have any agency in the story, and her most significant characteristics are that she is small and vulnerable and alone, but she's more than a plot device. She's there to evoke our empathy. We see Superman as she sees him, as the one thing she can depend on, no matter what. And we see her as Superman sees her, as an ordinary, unremarkable human being who is the most important person in the universe. The fate of Alice provides the only real stakes to the story. There is a threat to Earth introduced at the end when the villain's robots attack the planet, but that's a sideshow and it's treated as such. We never even actually see the villain in person or learn their name. None of that matters. What really matters is Alice. A hero saving the world isn't nearly as compelling as a hero saving a single life, especially if it's the life of a character we've come to care about and come to believe the hero cares about. Isn't that part of what makes Superman such an appealing character? It's not that he would save the world, although that's nice and all. It's that he would save you. It's the fantasy that if you're ever in trouble and all hope seems lost, all you have to do is call out for help and there's someone out there who will stop at nothing to get to you. That's our hero. That's his heart. Up in the Sky shows it to us. It's strong. It's tireless, it's open, it's the heart of the best Superman ever.